You are listening to Leading the Factory Forward with your host, Lynn Friest. We share interviews with manufacturing experts and strategies for embracing the digital future, recruiting a new workforce, finding new business. Lynn is an advanced manufacturing strategist and leadership consultant who is on a mission to show manufacturing leaders how to improve their current operations while preparing for a digital future. And here's your host, Lynn Friest.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Leading the Factory Forward. This is part 2 in our series, and it's entitled Habits of Mind in Action. And this series is preparing us for a powerful start in 2020. So recapping again, the 4 parts of our series, our starting year plan for 2020, which we covered last episode. This episode is Habits of Mind and Habits of Action. Next, we'll talk about could you use a coach to help you get off to a powerful start in 2020. And then finally, we're going to do a review of the 2019 podcast season and share with you some ideas for 2020. So as I talk about this, what will be your habits of mind and habits of action for 2020? I think of these things as, again, habits are a lot of what we do in life. So what are we going to do? And today I'm going to share 4 lenses to use in defining your goals for 2020. From last episode, you've hopefully been collecting those goals. And again, as a quick review, I ask you to do a couple of 20-minute mind dumps of all the things you have to do, you want to do, you hope to do, but find all those things where you think you have commitments for 2020 and list them out. And again, if you do this in a couple of 20-minute sessions or more, this will often lead you away from just the simple transaction activities that come to top of mind to sometimes more transformational ones that are really important to you in the long run. So again, we return to this idea of habits. For me, I think of habits of mind and habits of action. And as I've said in some earlier shows, habits comprise about 40% or so of our day. So it's important that we use those to help create those powerful routines for 2020. And again, when I say habits of mind, it also includes how you look at the world, your perspectives, and kind of your mindsets. So that's kind of how I look at those things. So again, I'll be looking at 4 different lenses or perspectives to use as you define your goals for 2020. And roughly, they're going to move from habits of action, the things we most often think of, down into maybe habits of mind. So for the first lens, I go back to a book I've talked about before, Do More Great Work by Michael Bungay-Stanier. And again, he says, let's define what is great work, what is good work, and what is bad work. Good work is the execution work. It's known work. But we can get trapped in the tyranny of the urgent, as Stephen Covey says. So we have to be careful about minding. The good work has to be done. It will usually comprise most of our day, but we just have to not let it overwhelm the great work. And the bad work is little or no value. Again, bad work is sometimes old habits, old reports, old sets of meetings, old habits of work. Again, as I've said earlier, we've all been involved in zombie meetings that just seem to keep happening, whether or not anyone's getting anything out of them. Finally, the great work, that's the work that's really going to cause a transformation in you, in your organization, in your business results. Those are the things. So it might be implementing agile. Those are the things you have to create new habits, both of mind and of action around. And they're difficult. It's not known. You have to really work hard on them, as well as your organization will have to work hard on them. So great work is not easy work. And you can probably only do so much of it in a given day, but you need to find at least some time to do that great work. Now, moving on to the second lens, here I think of the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. You may have listed out 25 commitments. You may have listed out 75 commitments. If you had 25 serious commitments, what are the top 5? Again, the 80-20 rule says 20% of your activities, actions, and intentions will generate 80% of your results. So here, before we just assume we're going to do everything on our list, this is the opportunity to step back and really examine what's your highest value activity. And often I would suggest to you, as I kind of place back on the first lens, is I think transformational activities are more valuable in general than execution activities. Now, there'll be cases where either one could be true. If you're trying to implement agile in your organization, well, then that's clearly a transformational activity. If, on the other hand, you work in a logistics organization, bulletproof execution of the work in a logistics organization can be extremely valuable. So building your team to, like I say, have bulletproof execution of your known work, that can be valuable. So it can go either way, but we just need to be thinking about that. Another question that's often asked in this 80-20 thing is, what problem are you really trying to solve? As you think back, whatever your assignment is, it's not your job description, whatever your business is. If I'm making widgets, What am I really trying to solve? What does my customer really need? Or if you're working in a larger organization, what does the downstream operation really need from me? Do they need quality, speed? They probably need all of those things. And again, in the case of some of these things, you may need to do something different next year than this year, so just keep that in mind. One of the great examples I remember from a German company, Siemens, as they made their plans for the new year, they really specifically said, what do we have to learn in the new year to execute our plan? And they was kind of followed up with that and said, well, if we don't have to learn anything new to execute our plan next year, then we may have a problem because we may be falling behind. We're clearly not innovating. We're clearly not doing new things. We're just doing what we've always done and already know. So again, this is the idea of look at all the activities, look at the ones that are important, but then really narrow your focus. It's the 20%. Make sure those 20% have time and energy and focus in your work. Jim Collins, who did the book Good to Great, said, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. Well, I've used this quote before, but it really comes back to it. You can't say I'm going to do 20 things. You may actually put some time into 20 things, but you're going to have to sharpen your focus at least a little bit, especially on the great work. A third lens to think of is, where is your energy? We may have all kinds of things we're supposed to do, want to do, hope to do, but I think it's useful to sometimes look back and where's your energy? When I'm coaching leaders who are listing off their goals, I can sense it. As they just read through their goals, I can sense when I hear energy in their voice and when I don't. So do this exercise for yourself. Read your goals out loud to a colleague or something like that. Ask them to see, where did I speak with energy when I talked about something? Another way to think about energy, that some good friends have had me go through the exercise, is what makes you mad and what makes you sad. Again, these are personal opinions. These aren't really organizational opinions in this case. So my example, what makes me sad? I'm an executive coach. So when I find businesses focusing on cost and headcount cutting, overdeveloping people, and actually working to make processes better, it makes me mad. It's the idea of just going from 5 people to 4 people and not doing the hard work of seeing, well, what 50 hours of work needs to be simplified, streamlined, automated, or eliminated, rather than just having one less person and assuming we can do all the work, which is generally speaking not going to be true. Then the follow-up question was, well, what breaks your heart or makes you sad? And for me, again, in my context of coaching business leaders, it's when I work with leaders who feel that they're stuck on the treadmill, and the only thing they can do is just keep running faster on that treadmill. The tyranny of the urgent. All the stuff is coming at them. They have no time to think or focus or develop. They really just have to execute. I had a friend once say their life is almost just breathless. They're always out of breath, kind of a thing. So again, it breaks my heart when leaders can't create the space or the time to develop themselves or others on their team or their organizations. Now, the fourth lens is, again, a very different one. And this is more habits of mind than maybe habits of action here. But this comes from a book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain, and he's a noted Wall Street Journal and New York Times contributor. This book I recently reviewed with a men's group, and the men in this group aged from 50s into their 90s. And so this was, the book is talking about 2 mountains in life. One is sort of, the first mountain is one of personal achievement, and then the second one is making a difference in other areas of life and not just in personal achievement. So again, for me, to shorten what I got out of the book, the first mountain for me is being good at what I do, being the very best. But the second mountain is, am I doing good? I can be good and be excellent at what I do, but I'm actually having an impact. Steve Jobs once said, am I making my dent in the universe? So again, this contrast is, instead of self-centered success around me, and even pursuing happiness, because that can kind of be a fuzzy thing. People actually find happiness hard to achieve through success. Whereas as you tend to look at your life, whether it be in the context of servant leadership or just a life of service of some kind, that leads to fulfillment and even joy in life. And again, a life of service can be in service in the job you're doing. What David Brooks kind of talks about is he suggests 4 commitments that you can make as you try to climb this second mountain, the mountain of significance. You can have commitments around vocation. You can have commitments around marriage. You can have commitments around philosophy or faith, however you define that. And then finally, you can have commitments around community. Another piece that was in his book was something that was interesting to me. He defined community in one way, which is a group of people in service to one another. But then he also talked about people can form tribes. And in his definition of it, tribes are where people are drawn together by fear. Fear of others, fear of the outside, fear of the unknown. Whereas a community is built on love and giving for the common good. So again, this whole idea of what am I doing to build either one or the other of those things? So again, 4 lenses. You can use them as you see fit. You don't have to use all of them. Some may ring more closely with you than others, but I think they're useful ways to just look back. And once you've got all those goals out there captured, what makes the most sense to focus your efforts on? So again, we're hoping for you to get off to a strong start and a powerful start in 2020. So actual hard first steps, use these 4 lenses. But then some of the specifics we talked about a little bit before is, okay, decide on what your big rocks from Stephen Covey. What are the big rocks for 2020 for you? The 5 to 7 things. He gives you a little more space than Jim Collins does. And then the next step would be start defining your first 90-day plan. What are you going to do in January, February, and March to attack those goals? And then the next step in more detail is decide on really what are the weekly big 3 actions for January. And if you want an even more powerful start, what are the 3 big actions you can do here on a week in December? And then finally, quite frankly, decide on today's daily big 3. What are the 3 things you really need to do today to start preparing for your powerful 2020? So that kind of wraps up what I was going to share with you in this episode. Now, in our next episode, we're going to keep moving on, and I'm going to explain some of the rationale why it might be useful for you to have a coach. For me, it is pretty clear as I talk about habits of mind and action, but we'll go into more in depth of what could be useful for you to have a coach as you, again, try to get off to a powerful start in 2020. That will be the 3rd part of our 4-part series. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.